Oh, hi there, guys. So it's been 2 years since the Welsh Government introduced the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit there. And there's an interesting article in The Guardian today which talks about how divisive it remains even now. So let's have a quick look through the article. So it talks about how there were demonstrations against the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit recently. And then in terms of the policy itself, it said last week a small study by GoSafe, which monitors road cameras, found the policy had added an average of 2 minutes to journey times of differing lengths, aggravating an already bitter culture war over legislation designed to save lives. So it says collisions along roads that have changed from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour decreased by 19% in 2024 compared to the year previously, and 100 fewer people a year have been killed or badly hurt in road traffic accidents. And that's according to Welsh Government figures. Yet according to canvassing Senedd members and local councillors, the issue remains deeply unpopular with voters as the country's embattled Labour administration gears up for elections next May. And then it says Phil Jones, a chartered engineer and transport planning expert who chaired the Welsh Government task force on establishing the 20-mile-an-hour default, said the policy was working exactly as intended. And then this is an interesting quote. He says, say all the roads go back up and casualties go up again too. What is an acceptable death toll that justifies getting to work 2 minutes faster? That's what people who want to get rid of it need to answer. So it's a very good question. I wanted to think a little bit more widely about what this sort of debate tells us, really. What I find really interesting about this 20-mile-an-hour debate is that there's concrete evidence, as outlined in the article there, that it reduces both deaths and serious injury with only minimal disruption to people's lives. 2 minutes added to your journey, what's that? Nothing. But yet people feel so strongly about it and are willing to go out to protest against it. Like the mind boggles about what's going through these people's mind, really. So I wanted to think about exactly that, really. Why do people feel so negatively and so strongly about this issue? So there's three main areas that I want to look at. Firstly, I want to consider the influence of the driving lobby in this country. In terms of this policy, it's obviously there's a concerted effort by motoring groups, politicians and the right-wing media to turn this 20-mile-an-hour policy into a sort of culture war issue. And you see these people's influence everywhere. They've been screeching about, low traffic neighbourhoods, bus lanes, cycle lanes, anything that benefits anyone other than drivers is always derided as some sort of woke conspiracy or lefty agenda. The debate instantly turns toxic, and these relatively minor policies are screamed about in such high-pitched tones for sort of months and years. And it helps, so this driving lobby, obviously it helps that they've got all the media and a broad coalition of right-wing politicians behind them. They can have a sort of outsized influence on the debate. The second thing that I wanted to think about, and it's linked to that, the influence of the driving lobby, is these complaints around the nanny state. Those groups that I just mentioned, they absolutely hate any form of government intervention in anything, to be honest. And this sort of focus on safety, is always characterised as red tape and bureaucratic overreach. So these people, the driving lobby, the right-wing politicians, the media, they're tapping into a rich seam of sort of public sentiment, which has been fed by those powerful organisations that I mentioned a minute ago for years and years. So you've had probably 45 years or more of a certain type of framing around government intervention. So any policy that's now proposed which does seek to improve people's safety, instantly looked at with hostility and through that lens. And then finally, I wanted to talk about sort of our wider culture, which, broadly speaking, is a sort of culture of individualism. I'm a pedestrian, a cyclist and a driver, and I also drive for work, so I feel well qualified to talk about this. But just go out onto the street, your nearest street, and just observe people when you're out there. The level of anger, frustration and rage is absolutely unbelievable. And this is what happens when people are funneled into their cars from public transport, partly because that public transport is so underfunded and is so lacking. But it's just part of a much wider trend in our society to sort of reduce our mutual bonds and the things that tie us together. The smashing of the trade unions, the selling off of council houses, the closure of pubs and working men's clubs. This fits into that sort of broader dismantling of our collective structures, I guess. When we drive our cars, we become individual units with no sense of anything larger. And obviously in that context, adding 2 minutes to any journey is beyond the pale in some sort of woke conspiracy. So in summary, I don't think this is even about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I think it's just a proxy for a much wider campaign against anything that is deemed to be outside the worldview of these vested interests that I've just talked about. And I think it's a parable for our times, really. Large amounts of people can be convinced to argue against their own interests due to the power of these vested interests. And I think what's a real shame is that the little kids who would be playing outside, or the poor bastard who doesn't get killed in an accident, they're just collateral damage to this wider agenda. And it's funny to me that obviously the people who are so vehement in having this 20-mile-an-hour speed limit overturned are the very same people who are going to cry on about children stuck in their bedrooms playing on their iPads. So it's the same sad and predictable story over and over again for me. But yeah, let me know what you think, guys. Are you in favour of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit? Let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next one.